What up, nerds? My name is Leslie. Welcome to the Nerdy Narrative. Today on the channel, I have a historical horror novel that I want to tell you about. I need to get it on your radar because if you haven't heard about it, it's going to be hitting the shelves March 18th, 2025, courtesy of my friends over at Saga Press. The book I'm talking about, none other than an American Indian revenge story by master of horror himself, Stephen Graham Jones. The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. First off, thank you Saga Press for approving my request to get a copy of this arc so I could read it early and gush about it. My love for this author started with The Only Good Indians. And this is not anywhere I would suggest someone new to this author begin. And it's largely due to the fact that people do not obey the commas. There are many commas used in this book, and you need to pause so that you can get into the rhythm of the narrator, the person's point of view that you're in. So many people that I've told them to do that, it changed their life. But this isn't where I would tell you to start. I would tell you to start with my most recent 5-star read and my new #1 favorite. This one, after many years of The Only Good Indians being my favorite, I Was a Teenage Slasher dethroned it. Another favorite I would suggest after I Was a Teenage Slasher is My Heart is a Chainsaw, which is the first book in the Indian Lake trilogy. So those are just a few of my favorite books by this author and why I wanted to read this one so bad. Now let's jump into The Buffalo Hunter Hunter. Let's start with, what in the world is this book about? The Buffalo Hunter Hunter is a chilling historical horror novel set in the American West in 1912 that follows a Lutheran priest who transcribes the life of a vampire who haunts the fields of the Blackfeet reservation looking for justice. In July of 2012, a diary written by the Lutheran pastor is discovered within a wall. What it unveils is a slow massacre, a chain of events that go back to 217 Blackfeet dead in the snow. The pages of this diary are transcribed interviews by a Blackfeet named Goodstab, who shares the narrative of his peculiar life over a series of confessional visits. Now, I know many of you heard the word vampire and you just stopped. You checked out and said, I need to read this book. This is the first time Stephen Graham Jones has ever written a vampire novel. And those of you who know this author well, you know of his love of horror and slashers. Did he stay true to the vampire lore? Yes. Did he give it some unique twists? Yes. How many of you, when you think of vampire, a dude in a suit with sharp teeth and blood red lips? You're probably thinking of some of the famous actors who've played Dracula over the years. You're thinking Van Helsing. You're thinking Kate Beckinsale in Underworld. Okay, but did any of you picture an indigenous vampire? Can you think how horrific an indigenous vampire would have been in 1912 when we were taking over, we were taking their land away from them, and we were relegating them to these tiny reservations while running off all of the food and their ability to live off the land? Can you imagine? There's actually a quote which could be changed in its final publication. Again, I read the arc. I have pre-ordered my finished copy, but I won't get it till March to verify. But there's a line in there that's something to the effect of, I am an Indian who cannot die. I am the true American nightmare. Let that just sink in for a minute. And that is just one of the many things that I loved about this book. Something else that I really loved about this book, and just Stephen Graham Jones in general, is how he changes his writing style based on what he's writing. If you have watched any of the Western shows like Westworld, or was it 1812 or 1912, the prequel to the Yellowstone show? I can't remember which it is. But if you watch any of those old Westerns or you read Westerns, you're going to fall right into this vocabulary very easily. And you're going, Stephen Graham Jones wrote that? He sure did. Wonderful. And quickly, while I'm thinking about the Yellowstone show, if you're a fan of that show, there was something called counting coup that I learned in the last season of Yellowstone. I'd never heard of it before until I saw that show, and it was used in here, and I was like, oh, I know what that is. But Stephen Graham Jones took that education one step further, and I learned why. I never thought about this before. Counting coup, that's a French word, but why did the indigenous people pick that up? You're going to learn that in here, which is another thing that I love about Stephen Graham Jones in general is I often describe him as a literary horror author. You have your entertaining slasher horror story, blood, guts, murder, mayhem, but there's always an underlying theme, something that he is trying to bring to your attention and educate you on. And y'all, this is the author who taught me to always read the author's note at the back or the acknowledgement section. And this acknowledgement section, it cut me deep. It cut me deep. It was beautiful and it made me cry. Something about me as a reader in particular, and all of this you should take under the lens of this is my opinion, this is my experience, and hopefully we've had some shared experiences, so you're looking for my opinion and hopefully I can help you with that. But something I don't ever look for in a horror novel is a character-driven story, because they're probably going to get killed. It's a horror novel. Somebody's going to get killed, right? There's going to be death, and I don't want to get attached to anybody. It was so hard. And with Stephen Graham Jones, and again, in general, he writes characters you get attached to, you're invested in emotionally. And I kept getting so confused about that because I kept getting attached to people, and then later in the story, there would be a twist or a turn I wasn't expecting, and I'm going, I am such a horrible judging character. This changes everything. And I felt guilty, and then it would switch again. I'm going, well, now wait a minute. What the heck is going on? Even though my ability to judge a person's character was called into question with this book, I loved being kept on my toes. I also loved that in the midst of this Lutheran priest, Arthur Beaucarn, while he's writing down the confessional visits of Good Stab, his life story, he interweaves descriptions of the food that his parishioners, his flock, the people that come to his church, what they bring him and leave for him to eat. And y'all, this man loved food, and I was right there with him. I was getting so tickled at his descriptions of food. I loved his day-to-day life. Some of the things he mentioned doing around his church and walking around the town. Loved it. So I found him to be very endearing. He was often so confused about why Good Stab was coming to him for confession. That's not something that Lutherans do. That's a Catholic practice, right? So you're thinking about that, but then you get past it because you're just so caught up in Good Stab's story, all of the tragedy this man experienced. And this whole time you're reading all of this stuff that's happened to him, and you know that it's not at its worst yet, because what has this person come in that he is confessing to? It just keeps you turning the pages. The suspense was just phenomenal. There would be all of these small buildups, and then there would be something that would kind of diffuse the situation, give you a little warm fuzzy, and then all of a sudden it just turns. And the scariest part, do I want to say this? Is it a spoiler? I would say the scariest part is not even in the diary. I'll say that. I was describing this book to my friend Una from the Codex Cantina, and I told him, I said, this is probably one of the best quiet rage books I have ever read. And if that doesn't make sense to you and you're planning on reading this book, just keep that in the back of your mind as you're reading and as the story builds and unfolds, and see if you don't agree. I also really liked the layout. So this is a nested narrative. When this story begins, it's 2012. Etsy Beaucarn, who is trying to write a book or something big that's going to secure her being able to get tenure at the university that she works at. She gets a call when this diary is discovered because she is a descendant of Arthur Beaucarn. They cannot find anyone else, so rightfully it's hers. She sees this as her opportunity to get her tenure, and so she immediately knuckles down in order to go through all of these pages that are being scanned and sent to her and transcribing them herself, thereby creating our story within a story. Oh, so good. Obviously, I love this book. I gave it a 5-star rating. to try and think about reasons why some of you might not would like it, I would say if you don't like historical fiction, this one might not be for you. You may love vampire stories, but you are more along the lines of Dracula and Underworld, where they're waging war on humanity and it's blood and guts and they're always doing all of the things to excess. This one is a more subtle type of vampire story. Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Honestly, I would say read this book. I absolutely loved it. If you are a fan of Stephen Graham Jones, you're gonna love this book, provided you like historical fiction. I do think it's important. And that's another thing that I loved about this book that I forgot to mention. There are so many factual places and events that Stephen Graham Jones weaves into the story. He makes it part of his characters' backstories that I love this author. I love this book. I say go ahead and pre-order your copy. Last I checked, hopefully they're not out of stock. Barnes & Noble had signed copies by the author with red sprayed edges, and included, there's some bonus material of different letters and things like that were from this era that he's included into the book, which I imagine that's how he did his research for how to adapt to the writing for the dialogue and things of that nature. Just absolutely love this book. Go get it right now. I'm going to put a pre-order link down in the description below if you have not already gotten your copy. I hope it brings you just as much entertainment as it did me. Thank you all so much for watching today. I hope I was able to get you turned into the right direction if you're on the fence about this book, and I really hope it's on the side of getting this book and reading it the day it comes out. Y'all have a fantastic rest of your day, and I'll catch you in the next one. This channel would not be what it is today without its patrons, especially those of my top tier: Ev, Sharon, Kate, Andrew, Amanda, Ann, Tara, Star, Gail, John, Chad, Heidi, and Wilbur.